In response to my opponent's argument that legalizing same-sex marriage should be the top priority of the LGBT civil rights movement, I must state that prioritizing the movement in such a way is neither effective, holistic, or prudent. Activists must turn their attention first to the countless other pressing issues facing the LGBT demographic, in particular, taking steps to eradicate the intolerant and dangerous cultural stigma against the LGBT community. These steps include, in particular, lobbying for hate crimes legislation, educating America's youth against discrimination, and reaching out to LGBT individuals who may be suffering severely from stigmatization. The first problem with focusing the civil rights movement on legalizing same-sex marriage is its alienation of a significant sector of the LGBT population. The LGBT civil rights movement aims to improve the lives of all members of the LGBT community, not just the segment seeking marriage. The right to marry, meanwhile, while very important to some, is not immediately pertinent to the lives of many LGBT individuals. This includes youth who have yet to consider it, those who have no desire to get married, and those who are entirely comfortable with a domestic partnership or other non-marriage arrangement. The civil rights movement needs to offer individuals such as these a tangible and relevant goal to work towards, or else risk losing their vital loyalty and support. My opponent spent much time discussing how love and marriage are ideals that the American people identify with, and that will make this nation as a whole more welcoming to the LGBT community. However, by this logic, such welcome will only be extended to those LGBT individuals who specifically choose to exercise the right to marry. This could be extremely detrimental to the LGBT activist body's ability to appear and function as a unified and coherent whole. Focusing on same-sex marriage also does not provide a solution to another alienation issue, the role of the T, or transgenders, and LGBT. My opponent claims that the legalization of same-sex marriage addresses the grievances of the transgender community as completely as it does for lesbians, gays, and bisexuals. However, this is not exactly the case. While legalizing same-sex marriage may solve a logistical problem for transgenders, it still awards them second place. It forces them to accept the label of gay marriage on their unions when their marriages may in fact be straight, according to the genders with which they identify. Thus, it continues the societal failure to acknowledge the unique nature of their situation and their right to determine how their gender should be classified. The voice of the transgender community is better heard through addressing other issues relevant to the LGBT community, such as using legislation, education, and outreach to break down the cultural stigma I have mentioned before. This stigma remains unfortunately powerful across the nation. One need not look beyond his or her own neighborhood to notice. Given this reality, we must question the overall effectiveness of the legalization of same-sex marriage in furthering the civil rights movement at all. My opponent claims that same-sex marriage carries with it a strong appeal to positive emotions. However, how far can such an appeal get when it still has an obstacle as great as the stigma to face? In order to make such an appeal, same-sex couples will either have to conform to whatever restrictions the intolerant community wishes to put upon their unions to fit their apple pie conception of the classic marriage, or rage even stronger against such intolerance and thus drive their adversaries still further from understanding the greater grievances of the entire civil rights movement. Such risk of terrible and potentially irreversible backlash brings me to another point. Making same-sex marriage the top priority of the LGBT civil rights movement is simply not prudent at this moment in time. The legalization of same-sex marriage will undoubtedly receive negative attention in conservative circles. This is in sharp contrast to my opponent's vision of the romantic, non-confrontational wedding day. The time has not yet arrived when such attention would be insignificant. Not enough has been accomplished on other issues, again, like hate crimes legislation and tolerance education. According to the same Gallup poll my opponent discussed, the number of Americans supporting same-sex marriage only just passed the 50% mark this year. Why shouldn't the LGBT community wait, as a judicious stockbroker might, until the numbers are more on their side? If the upward trend continues, which all data seems to point to it doing, the optimal moment to strike will arrive within the decade. In the meantime, a host of other issues can be more practically and more efficiently addressed. The LGBT civil rights movement has made incredible progress, but it still has a daunting war to wage. Making reasonable decisions involving movement priorities is of infinite importance to their capability of putting up such a great fight. Therefore, it is crucial the movement put eradicating through various means the powerful cultural stigma they face before legalizing same-sex marriage. Such prudent, effective, and holistic strategy can and will deliver their cause.